Joining us now, the top-ranking Democrat on the House Intel Committee, Congressman Adam Schiff of California. Congressman, good to see you this morning. I want to get your take. Haven't heard your public comment, if there's been one, about Mike Pompeo's trip, now confirmed this morning by the President of the United States, to North Korea over Easter weekend to meet with the dictator there, Kim Jong-un. Good news for diplomacy?
I think it is good news for diplomacy, and I'm glad that the meeting took place. Look, it's much better than the footing we were on before, where we had the President of the United States and the Supreme Leader comparing the size of our nuclear buttons. So this looks like preparations into a real talk between our President and the leader of North Korea. Until this point, I think we were wondering, is this really going to happen? Did the South Koreans relay an accurate message? But it looks like it's going to take place. The challenge is this is a very high-stakes endeavor when you start out with a summit of the top leadership. If the president finds that his winning personality doesn't cause North Korea to denuclearize overnight, does that mean the president is going to conclude, okay, this was a waste of time, it's time to use the military option? I hope our administration understands this is a long-term, difficult endeavor, negotiating with the North Koreans. If it was easy, it would have been done successfully before, and it hasn't. Does
President Trump deserve some credit up to this point for how he's handled the situation? Obviously, he's had a lot of help from North Korea, from South Korea brokering these conversations with North Korea, and South Korea sort of opening its doors in a way it hasn't for a couple of generations. But should the president get some credit up to this point?
Well, we'll have to see whether this bears any fruit, I think, before we can give credit.
But so far, how's he doing with it?
You know, it's a mixed record, honestly. He has been all over the map, as you indicated earlier. At times, he said Rex Tillerson was wasting his time seeking a diplomatic option. He was saying we should, go to the military option. And now he's on a different track. He may be, once again, on his war footing a week from now. So I'm going to reserve judgment. Frankly, I got out too early praising the president earlier in the week for the announcement that we were going to impose sanctions on Russia over their support for Bashar al-Assad and gassing his own people. And that praise turned out to be far too premature.
Congressman Schiff, this is Eddie Glaude. Could you say a little bit more? What are your thoughts about the Trump administration's walk back of the Russian sanctions? And I want to pair it with the question about your thoughts of James Comey and his book tour and how he's trying to become the face of the resistance. So talk a little bit more about what you think walk back of the Russian sanctions and what Comey's talking about these days.
You know, it's very hard to make out what just happened here in terms of the Russia sanctions. I thought it was a very smart approach. I said so, that we would target facilities that were not likely to kill Russians, that wouldn't escalate the conflict further, that would send a message to Bashar al-Assad, and then we would combine it with sanctions. That was a good way to hit Russia, but a safe way to hit Russia. I have to think that Nikki Haley was not out there announcing sanctions that were going to be imposed on Monday with that kind of specificity without broad agreement, without getting a green light. So whether the president got cold feet or whether the president simply changed his mind, I don't know, but I certainly would not place responsibility on Nikki Haley. I think she's too competent to have massively messed up by announcing something that had not been agreed to. In terms of James Comey, look, I've always found him to be honest and a straight shooter. I don't think he's saying anything that he doesn't believe to be the case. But he made very serious errors of judgment in violating the department policy, particularly around the time of the election. It was highly consequential, and there's no mistaking that. And I also think there was a double standard in how the Clinton investigation was treated and how the Trump investigation was treated. So I don't begrudge him the opportunity to tell his story when he's constantly under attack by the president. And his accounts are consistent with his Senate testimony. They're consistent with the memos that he wrote. They're consistent with what other witnesses have said about his interactions with the president. So I fully credit him as opposed to what the president is saying. But nonetheless, he is going to have to explain to history why he made the judgments that he did.
Congressman Peggy Noonan here. Sometimes I'm thinking as you speak, members of your caucus, of the Democratic caucus, ever get together these days and say to each other, in the age of Trump, what do we in the Democratic Party believe in? What do we stand for? What are the hills we would die on? And do you ever hear of your Republican colleagues having such conversations, not about tactics and strategy, but the meaning of things?
We certainly do within our caucus. We have a lot of, kind of soul searching and as well as strategy sessions within our caucus. How do we approach this issue? What's the right thing to do? What's the best agreement that we can reach? What's the right thing for the country? So we do wrestle with this as you would hope that we would. As for my GOP colleagues, I have to think that they do that as well. And I'm always struck, frankly, when I walk down the hallway and I'll have one of my GOP colleagues, sometimes very senior members of the GOP conference, say to me in a hushed tone, "Keep doing what you're doing." That, of course, is a heresy for anyone in the GOP to say something like that. But I think they recognize the challenges facing the country. They need people to be speaking out, even if they feel at the moment they're not able to do it. I wish more of them would, frankly, and I think McConnell's announcement that he won't take up this bill just reinforces the idea that when this dark chapter of history is written about the Trump presidency, some of the harshest criticism will be reserved for the GOP leadership and its unwillingness to stand up for the rule of law in our institutions when the country really needed it.
And we just had your Republican House colleague Charlie Dent on the show a few minutes ago, who acknowledged that part of the reason he's leaving early is because he is exhausted by President Trump. Congressman Adam Schiff of California, thanks so much as always.